Welcome everybody to the Funky Marketing Show. Today I have the great pleasure of hosting Paul Cash. I guess he's not related to all the people with surname Cash that we know, but
maybe, you never know.
yeah, but he's somebody that's been going deeper into the B2B marketing stuff and the way B2B industry is changing. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So I wanted to start with kind of an overview. I won't go that much into why I'm in B2B. It will just be the intro. Paul will do the talking. But when I was starting Funky Marketing, I was looking at, coming from B2C. I was looking at B2B and it was all like foggy, mystic, no emotions, no feelings, no showing humanity. Companies focus only on features, on themselves, not talking about the problems, not focused on customers. And it was all sort of like all the companies are acting like the decisions are made in a rational way with no emotions included. So I said, okay, there's a huge gap over there. And there are a lot of space for us who, have a B2C background to bring that kind of focus on customers or on people into the B2B. So this is how we started actually Funky Marketing. And I saw that a lot of strategies, a lot of things that work in B2C, work in B2B as well. So I wanted to ask you for the start, is this the way you saw B2B a couple of years ago, or it was a little bit different?
Yeah, so I obviously started my journey in B2B nearly 30 years ago. So like most people, it was a happy accident. I fell into a job working for Hewlett-Packard, had no idea who they were, had no real understanding of the technology sector. But like any first job, you learn quickly, and that often shapes your career and your identity moving forward. When I got into my first agency, B2B was still, very much the speeds and feeds product marketing that we've known it for the past 2 decades. But mostly that was due to the fact that technology as a sector was growing massively. And it was the first time that any of us had seen this huge demand for brands like Cisco and Vodafone and Microsoft and Oracle, all back in the kind of early 90s. So there was definitely a fascination with wanting to know what the tech was. And in any early stage market, that is quite an interesting story to tell. But because the tech sector has matured so much over the past 2-3 decades, obviously the way to market to decision makers has evolved and changed as well. And so we've seen this inflection point over the last 10 years, I would say, where we've moved away from this speeds and feeds, performance marketing, rational thinking, logic drives everything, towards this shift where we're trying to connect with people on a higher emotional level, where B2B companies are recognizing the power of their brand, not just their products, and they're changing. But that change, like all things, takes time. And the pandemic has really been an accelerant in terms of how people have had to rethink the way they go to market and how they need to make their brands ready for a post-pandemic world. So the pandemic has definitely been a catalyst for change in B2B. And it's, let's face it, we are 50 years behind B2C. Do you know what I mean? And we're catching up fast. And while the two do have their differences, there is also a coming together of the psychology, the understanding of the human condition, the mind, neuroscience, all those things that are still relatively new to B2B. And that's what makes it a great and exciting place to be. Yeah,
I totally agree. And it's interesting kind of to be in the middle of the changes. I think like COVID accelerated everything like 10 years advance. But, I expected some things as like focus on MQLs, for example, like to be changed. But so far, it's going a little bit slower than I expected.
Yeah.
And in B2B, like companies are bigger, sales processes are longer, there are multiple decision makers involved. So everything is taking much longer than it's B2B. So it's kind of expected, but I also see it's changing. So you actually wrote a book called Humanizing B2B to, I guess, help the transition in a way. So, so we can understand better what's going on over there and how B2B is getting more human.
Yeah. And, I wrote the book because, one, I was obviously really passionate about trying to take B2B in a new direction. But also I think that, B2B was missing a philosophy. It's very easy for us to kind of keep jumping to the next big new shiny tactic of B2B, whether it's ABM, influencer marketing, AI copy, whatever it might be. And we got all these domain experts who are really good, but actually trying to put that into the context of the human decision makers and trying to be experts in people first, rather than experts in just the subject matter we're trying to talk to, felt to me that we needed to embrace this idea that B2B needs to reflect the audience more and less about kind of the product. And so Humanizing B2B was my chance to put a blueprint, a stamp down, as it were, around, what I call the 5 principles, which are effectively B2B is about people, not just products. It's about trying to help companies have a purpose that's actioned, not just a purpose that sits as a great statement on a PowerPoint presentation. It's about putting emotion at your marketing core. It's about something I call brand likability, which I think is a huge opportunity in B2B. And finally, it's about trying to use storytelling as your vehicle to really change the way people think about your brand. So Humanizing B2B is a book. It's been launched since April. It's doing really well at the moment, and really excited to see where that goes and trying to get as many people to buy into the concept as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Doing my share of helping to promote it. Basically, I wanted now to go back and to tell a little bit about your background before we dive into the 5 principles and everything else. Because I think just going through your background, you can actually see the way you came up with Humanizing B2B. So basically, you are, as you said, like 30 years, 25 years careers in business marketing, entrepreneurship. Starting, well, when I was 11, 12 years old in 96, you set up Screensaver software company. After that, co-founded a technology marketing company called Tidal Wave, which became the fastest growing marketing agency in the UK. And I saw there's an interesting fact that you were offered 90 million pounds for somebody to buy it.
So that's probably one of those classic big mistakes that I look at. Yeah, so I was lucky enough when I was in my mid-20s to set up an agency called Tidal Wave that you just mentioned, and we grew that just crazy through the growth of the technology sector in the 90s and the early 2000s, and we were the fastest growing agency in the UK, the 11th fastest growing privately owned company. We couldn't put a foot wrong. It was a crazy ride. And then the dot-com bubble burst in 2002. And with it came a micro recession within the technology sector. And because I ran a technology agency, we felt the full force and brunt of that. So whereas many other agency owners who were doing the B2C never even knew there was a micro recession in the tech space, it hit us hard. And it was, again, like all these things, on reflection, you look back, it was a great learning curve. You have to pivot, you have to adapt, change. It kind of tests your own strength and character and all that kind of good stuff. But when you're in the middle of it all, it's sometimes very difficult. But that was a great experience. And along the way, because we were so successful, we had an offer on the table for 19 million pounds to acquire it. But when you're young and stupid and have never seen money like that, you always think you're worth more. So it's kind of a bittersweet kind of story for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have some stories to tell, right? If you have that, I mean, you would have a different kind of stories.
Yeah, for sure. And the world is full of stories. That's what it's all about. So.
Yeah, and basically, then you started Rooster Punk, B2B agency, and I gotta tell you, I love the website. I love the look of it, the branding, and you can see that you are bringing something different to the business just by looking at the website, not getting into all the things that you have done, and you can see the storytelling screaming from the website.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because back in late 2013, early 14, when I set up Rooster Punk, You know, I had a really strong vision for where I wanted B2B to go, but like any innovator, you're always far more ahead of where the market really is. And while I could see the potential of it, it was really difficult talking to clients around storytelling, which was the kind of the thing that we were kind of gravitating towards. And it was account-based marketing, or ABM, that was the real horse to back in those days. And, you know, the storytelling journey for me was every year we'd see more people receptive to it. And it wasn't until 2019, you know, almost 5 or 6 years later, before we started to see a sea change, where all of a sudden storytelling in B2B seemed to be very vogue and more people were talking about emotion in B2B. And we started to see a significant uptick in revenues for the agency. And as you then COVID kind of hit, and then, you know, most agencies had 6 months of just figuring stuff out. And then B2B obviously is an incredibly resilient sector because of the tech bias. And again, we've seen a strong end to last year and a strong start to this year. So I'm excited for the future of B2B. I'm excited for the future of storytelling and emotion. But that's not to say that all the other good functional stuff doesn't work. It's just we need to find this balance. It's that very much that yin and yang, you know, within B2B, which is, you know, the top of the funnel stuff is very much emotion driven. And, you know, as we nurture through the funnel, we need to get the more robust fact-based content out there. And at the bottom of the funnel, we need to bring that emotion back out again. So it's just changing the way we think a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot make it just focusing on creative and storytelling on one end and not focusing on data, or focusing just on data without storytelling and creative. Basically, you need both sides to be effective today.
Yeah, and intelligent storytelling is data-driven as well. I mean, you know, when you think about storytelling in its purest form, you might think about, you know, a piece of brand video and that hardcore emotion. But in the day-to-day of campaigns, looking at data, being able to interpret what the story is and be able to do real-time marketing, you know, to certain storylines, and that kind of, you know, transmedia storytelling. So whichever platform it needs to live on, whether it's through email, whether it's through video, whether it's, you know, on a YouTube site or a print ad or whatever that might be. So there's lots to explore and do for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about how the buyers' behavior changed. Because I think this is what drives the B2B to change as well, right? What are some insights that you have over there related to that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, a lot of this is quite popularized, but there is the well-known facts that, you know, most B2B decision makers and buyers, they are 60, 70, 80% of the way through their buying journey before they contact a vendor. And what that means to me is that you better have a strong digital brand presence, your website, the story you tell, because unless you're influencing the way these people think, you're not going to be in that final consideration set at the other end. So it's more important than ever that a brand is represented well through the website, through content, through thought leadership, all the touch points you're getting people to activate and download before they interface with a human being, before they have a salesperson or a consultant present to them. So there's a big job to be done there. I think the decision makers these days are in their mid-30s. You know, they are that kind of Gen Y decision maker. We're seeing the Gen Z come through as well, and they are just a little bit more compassionate, generally speaking, in the way they think about the world and the planet. And I think that means that they are more receptive to certain ways of companies who have a strong sense of purpose, you know, who have a strong employee culture. I think they buy into that a lot more in the brands they want to work with. And on the flip of that, in the USA and the UK specifically, we are now seeing the average or the median age of a person being 40 for the first time ever. So we are an aging population. And as we age, it's been known that actually that inflection point of 40, we become less interested in self and more interested in family, planet, environment, and all those kind of other things that in later life you care more about. So you've got the younger decision makers who are maybe more compassionate, and then the older decision makers who are actually biased towards being more driven around all this new stuff we do, you know, ESG and things like that. So I think it's just changing the way that they look and view brands. And again, in the book, I talk about this idea that, you know, people don't want to buy from you anymore. They want to buy into you. Do you mean? And I think that's a really big thing. So when they want to buy into a company, they're looking at everything. They're looking at your purpose, your mission, your vision, your customer service, how good your products are, how strong your employee culture is, what are people, all those, non-verbal brand cues, as they were, are really important in the way they play in people's minds before they make a decision.
You think this is what affected the way LinkedIn is developing as the main B2B platform, because it's all focused on personal brands of the people in front of the company, and tech is built by people, and as we are going into that direction, I see more and more, as you said, younger C-level executives, managers, leaders sharing their knowledge, learnings, and building their personal brand, and then guiding the company, realizing the importance of the founders brand, founders LinkedIn account in this way for leading the startup, let's say, or another company, and then using the employees also for doing the smart content distribution, and basically transcending the message, the branding, the message, the narrative, and everything through their employees.
Yeah, and you're right. This convergence of social selling, personal branding, storytelling in the context of a platform like LinkedIn all comes to a critical point when you've gone through that buyer journey, and then you need to interface with a salesperson or a consultant. Now, the first thing most people will do will go and check out on LinkedIn who it is they're going to speak to. Yeah, and if that person represents themselves in a way that makes them an interesting, exciting, expert, passionate individual, then when they engage, they're obviously coming to the table with, a kind of a warm, receptive market. If you, again, the challenge here is you were looking to engage with a 22-year-old, yeah, and they've got no life story to tell, then that conversely has another buyer. So definitely, I think, I know a lot of people hate the word or phrase personal branding, but there's no better description for it. But you're absolutely right. How people show up now through social media on LinkedIn is a real powerful way to be able to influence buyers and decision makers. And, I speak from a point of view where, I'm an author, I've got a business, I'm in that consultative selling kind of zone. And, my LinkedIn profile is really important to me. And I'm sure it has an influence on the people who want to engage and work with me or Rooster Punk.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask you. So I get it how the change is happening for the companies that are just starting or have the younger leaders. But what about those that are here in business for 20 years, where people have learned to do marketing in a different way, to do sales in the old ways? How can we impact them to change and to get to more human approach? How do we get into that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think part of the challenge is not necessarily trying to change the minds of those people who don't want their minds changed. There is always a certain amount of marketeers out there who embrace the new, who want to have an always learning mentality and attitude. And for those individuals who are still conscious about growing their career and learning, then they're always going to be finding new things to add towards the core stuff that they know works for them. And I think at this point in time, storytelling is one of those additive things that people are arriving at and go, right, how do I make this work? I'm happy to experiment with it. And maybe over the next decade, we'll start to see storytelling being core in the future. But at the moment, it's still around the edges for a lot of people. So I think it's definitely an education phase that we're in. And the more case studies are out there, the more agencies, I know lots of agencies talk about storytelling, and it's become a bit of an overused word, I guess, to stick on your website and say we do storytelling. But there is a lot of good science behind it for the agencies who do it well. And I'm sure there's lots of clients who have seen tremendous results off the back of doing this vis-a-vis a traditional marketing campaign. So in my view, storytelling is story selling. Do you mean I love that little cliched phrase to a large extent, because when you connect with people on that emotional level, it does have an impact.
Definitely. And the way I see it, the change is also happening in the way that that companies are seeing what marketing is doing. So it was, they're getting us MQLs, or they're creating events, doing webinars and getting us MQLs so salespeople can call them, right? But it was mostly because companies are built on sales and they need MQLs, they need leads, so they support the salespeople that are already hired. But, you know, as you already know, those are not quality leads, and they don't lead to the revenue. Most of those people are here just to, to get an ebook, to read it, to watch the webinar, those kind of things. They are not interested because they are not educated enough about what you're selling. So the way I see it, the change is happening, that marketing is the engine that creates the awareness, educates people, creates the brand, so that salespeople, when they do the outreach, they come up to the companies that already know who they are. And it's easier for them to do the job. Also, then we get inbound leads who are basically the already ready clients. And so we can increase the bigger deals, getting more to the revenue. And, it changes the whole system inside the company, because now for both departments to understand what's happening, they need to work together. And then we add customer success, which is basically driving the conversation with the customers or the buyers. Is it the way you are seeing things moving?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that popularized phrase, which is, you get the customers you deserve. Do you mean? And, for brands who constantly mine Google alongside every one of their competitors, they get a certain type of customer. The more fickle one, the more price conscious one, the probably ones who are going to switch, the ones who are going to be less loyal. If you, on the other hand, create customers because you have a brand that actually represents something about you and the market and the way you think about the world, and people gravitate towards that, then those customers are more likely to buy into you. They're likely to be more loyal. They're likely to, or you're able to charge a higher price to them, etc. And I think some of this is borne out in data. And obviously, the best salespeople are actually order takers. Yeah, they're not salespeople. You've created such a great brand in market that people are knocking on your door, and all sales are there to do is to kind of, sign off the paperwork. The hard end of sales, when you've got to go out there and you've got to work hard to be able to turn an opportunity into a sale. So I think, the ideal scenario that I would like to see in B2B is the ever-growing role of brand being a dominant part of the landscape, to try and influence people around what companies do, to do that initial kind of selling and positioning, and a more balanced approach against the performance marketing and the lead generation, which is super dominant at the moment. So I'm hoping that we get to see that change. And this has been borne out in all the Binnerton Field stuff on the B2B marketing, the long and the short of it, this recognition that we need to kind of, marry up brand and sales activation on a more even keel in B2B.
Yeah. I mean, this is what's happening. I think as I look, as I go to the LinkedIn, I see companies that are winning based on that. Like if you look at, I don't know, the Gong, if you look at sort of what Drift did a couple of years ago, we are seeing companies that are rising in front of our eyes, right? On LinkedIn, slowly we get a few more people going over there. Now we can see also Chris Walker in Refine Labs, how changing the narrative of the marketing gets you going. Do you see as companies winning just by creating the new category? Is that the way that they need to go to actually build a brand, or they can go and do something different? Meaning okay, we are building technology inside the company. It's nothing much excited as somebody who is engineer or developer. Maybe we need something additionally outside of the company. So we are focusing on helping the community, building some things out of it to actually get our employees to care what we are doing, and also to get the buyers to care about the same things that we are caring.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned a really good word there, which is care. I generally think the brands that show they care about their market, they care about their product, they care about their customers, they care about their employees, they care about the world and society, and they do it in an authentic way, are definitely on the front foot when it comes to representing the best of B2B out there. But like all things, and you've gone through a big list there, it's incredibly complicated to get all these things right and to put them into the configurator and press a button and it all magically happens for you. A lot of this is down to amazing leadership, great vision, hugely talented teams, people who are free to take risks, to be curious, to be brave with their marketing, and to experiment and challenge what's gone before. And when you get that kind of attitude in a really good company with really good VCs or strong stakeholders, you get to see change happening. But it only happens for 1 in 50, 1 in 100 companies. Do you know what I mean? Because that type of environment and culture is being created is not every day. It's the unusual. And that will always be the case. We're never going to get every company being able to embrace this stuff, because it's as much about the leadership and the culture behind it as it is the tactics of what we're talking about. And you mentioned Drift, and David Cancell's a great leader. He's very visionary, and he's built an amazing company.
Yeah, but I remember them because it's how I found out about the importance of doing things that won't scale. Because basically, when I was working as director of operation in another agency, we bought a book, Conversational Marketing.
Yes.
And after 2 weeks, we got through the post mail another book, which is called This Won't Scale, a small book, 40 pages. We didn't order it. They just sent it because we bought Conversational Marketing, and they listed 40 things that they have done to build a hypergrowth company. And they just sent it out as a bonus for us to get into it and to actually see what are some things behind the scenes that you need to set up the company, but also setting the example of, sending it without you actually ordering or knowing actually that it exists. So how did
they get your data? How did they know you bought the book?
No, we bought Conversational Marketing book.
Yeah.
So they just sent another book on the same address.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a bonus added value.
Yeah.
And it was interesting at the time because I was trying different things. I was trying to get involved people from the agency back at the time to, because I saw that employees of the company will be the biggest influencers of that company. When we lost the news feed of Facebook, when the algorithm changed and all those kind of things. But I realized I don't have the right people, because it's not me who needs to tell them you need to go out there, start posting, build a personal brand, those kind of things. But I need people in the company who will come with that mindset. It's up to them, not up to me. If I tell them to do it, it's going to last for 2 weeks maybe, and that's very tense. So it's also about one thing that you mentioned is so the founder having the vision and coming in with the right values, then bringing in people who have the same values, and then it builds up as you bring the people. So and it's extremely important if you want to go in direction where everything is going.
Yeah, and I think also there's an incredible maturity that a lot of people have in marketing these days, which is they're prepared to take a creative risk, to do something that actually is going to create real attention and stand out in the market, and not always revert to that conservative baseline, which is very common in B2B. And I think that plays out to a maxim that I talk about, which is it's more important to be interesting than it is to be right. Every brand will make the right argument while their company should be the one you choose, but it's the ones that interest us are the ones that kind of the starting conversation happens. So being interesting in B2B, because let's face it, it's a battle for attention out there. There's thousands of brands in fintech and normal tech and edutech and B2B. There's money from VCs awash in every category. It's incredibly noisy, and if you're a buyer or decision maker, you want a simple life. Do you mean you want brands who, when they show up, it's clear what they do. You can get a real pulse check on the kind of company they are, and anything that gets in the way of that, in terms of brands that are just too complicated to understand, they just get pushed to the side.
So is that the right direction? So clarity and consistency for the brands.
I think, yeah. I mean, consistency less so. Yes, you know, if you're a big blue chip, consistency is an important factor. But I think inconsistency, and I mean that in the nicest way, just trying to do curious and weird and odd things with your brand that create that glitch effect where people just stop and go, I didn't expect that. I think that's a real powerful technique in all forms of marketing, B2B or B2C, you know, and sometimes consistency can get in the way of that. So I think experimentation, doing unusual things, stuff that your brand shouldn't do is the kind of stuff that's going to make you interesting and grab people's attention. But it all gets back to having a culture in marketing in the business that, you know, is brave and courageous and, you know, wants to push boundaries and try new things and, you know, finds that nice middle ground of doing the business as usual stuff as well.
Yeah. Oh, we said a lot of things.
Yeah,
we went into a lot of directions. So thank you for this. Anything you would like to say for the end? Any message you want to send to people, something that we maybe didn't say?
No, I would just say, you know, if you're a B2B marketeer, it's an incredibly exciting time. I know that we all feel that the category is growing and changing and evolving and adapting. And, you know, it's always good to get different points of view. You know, the book Humanizing B2B is just one direction of travel. It's not the only direction of travel, but if you're interested in that, you know, the book's on Amazon, go and take a look at it. It's got some great reviews, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, guys, listen to Paul, do that. I'm waiting for mine to arrive. I think it's going to arrive on Monday.
Okay.
It's been some kind of a delay. Yeah, that's it. And there's a rooster as well on the front page.
We've got the rooster on the front page. So myself and my business partner, James, we actually got our fingerprints done. And then we used the fingerprints to create this rooster motif on the front. So it was our expression of humanizing in the best way we could. So there's a little story behind that.
Yeah, that's it, guys. The Paul said at the beginning of the book that there's a meteor coming to hear us that will change everything. And I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. I think that it's time to change and we need to do our part to make the change happen.
Yeah, great to speak with you. Thank you.
Likewise, guys, thanks for being here. Make sure you follow Paul on LinkedIn. Make sure you buy a book. I'll add links below so you can go ahead and directly follow him and buy a book, and see you on the next episode.